This was an awaited session. We waited for like a couple of weeks to host, Krish on this show of Dawdle.live. And we are extremely grateful that you have taken out time to share your insights and experiences with our global audience. We have very interesting set of topics to discuss with you, Krish. But before we go there, would be great if you could take us to your journey so far to give a context to our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rishikesh, for having me, and apologies for delay in getting on this podcast. So I've had an exciting, career journey. So I come from a computer science educational background, and that kind of took my attention towards data and computers and, software and whatnot, right? And I believe, I did my master's here in the US, and, while doing that, I've had the honor of meeting a lot of the executives while I was in my master's. So that also gave me a lot of, hope and motivation to get into this field, right? So I consider myself more of a techno sales person because I come from a technology background where I worked in large GSIs and smaller shops running technology practices and building offerings, technology offerings within data analytics and AI space. And then I've shifted my career more into selling these offerings because from the get go of my career, I have been told that I have the knack for solving problems, right? Business problems. And our leadership, whenever, I was in large ESI, which is smaller shops, like, they recognize the fact that, I'm more of a customer facing person rather than calling a salesperson, right? Where you go speak to customers, realize their problem statements, and how can we create an efficient solution for them to have a proper business outcome for them, right? So I think that's where I am today. I'm currently working as the president at a small services company, leading the entire sales operation for data analytics and AI services, also Salesforce and other services.
Got it, Krish. And Krish, you have spent years, shaping the evolution of analytics and AI across multiple industries. So, what was that which kind of, first drew it into the world of data, and how has your own understanding of its potential evolved over time?
So, as I mentioned, I've always been a person who loves to do analysis, right? And, you can't do analysis without having a good understanding of data points, right? So, any problem, may that be during your master's or during your bachelor's or any situation in personal life as well, like to do analysis of a situation and weigh in the solutions before we make a decision, right? I believe that, personality is a big trait in choosing a career, right? That's what I've coached our kind of teams on and people on, where you have a certain personality, you have a certain career for you, right? So for me, I think that data analysis background really helped me get into this whole data analytics space. And after my master's, I've talked to multiple people. I've always been a big fan of mentorship. So I've had these mentors and I've talked to them about, which career should I be choosing, right? And they asked me a couple of questions. I was able to answer, and I was very naive at that time, right? And my answers were naive at the same time. Right? So their kind of decisions around how I should approach choosing a career really helped that kind of make that decision as well.
Mentors are so very important. Like, and in this era, what I feel is that mentorship is too much lacking. Like, if you compare this, say 10 years back, people used to mentor. Now, it has become very transactional these days. You see a lot of platforms which are kind of monetizing mentorship.
Yes.
I kind of am okay with some sort of it, but I am not okay with everything being monetized because anybody approaching you and you sending them a Calendly link with a $500 ticket size on that.
Yeah.
What
And luckily for me, right, I've had very good relationships with our executive teams where, I have personally approached them. Can you be my mentor? Right? Can I be your mentee? And I think in this mentor mentee relationship, the most important thing is setting guardrails, right? Like, so you have to make sure that, you're using that for your own mentorship session, right? You're not using that for any personal help or kind of personal favors, right? So that has helped me kind of set those guardrails, and those were a few things which helped me get a lot of mentors at different levels. When I was in our GSI, I used to have mentors from vertical team, industries, right? And from technology team. The mentor would be outside of our unit, right? So technology unit. So
Yes.
that way it's not like, we're having direct impact around what we are doing, but we learn how other leaders are thinking about solving problems.
And Krish, when we talk about organizations, you find a lot of organizations these days, they claim to be data driven, but only a few truly are. So, from your experience, what separates an enterprise that genuinely is leveraging analytics for transformation from those, who only use it for reporting?
Yeah, I think the data driven term is pretty much kind of a cliche, right? And I would say, like, a lot of organizations, they want to be data driven, but they struggle with the definition of being data driven, right? So, because, let me give you an example, right? Like, I want to drive a Lamborghini, right? Have I ever driven a Lamborghini before? No, right? Do I understand how the gear mechanism works? No, but I have this dream of becoming, or driving a Lamborghini. But I'm driving, let's say, a BMW today, right? So I'm really good at it. So I think the progression is the key, right? I'm not trying to say like BMW is not great, Lamborghini is excellent, but the analogy here is like you are wired to do certain things in a certain way because your culture, right? I like German cars, like, I like BMW. I kind of grow up that way, right? So I think a lot of organizations don't understand the basics, right? I always keep saying this, like, having your basics correct is going to be super important, right? Becoming data driven means that you have your processes set up accordingly. Where people are thinking about using data effectively, making decisions based on data. As an organization, you have technology to support that. And all this combined is going to help an organization become a data-driven organization. But in my opinion, what separates organizations who are data-driven versus who are wanting to be data-driven is the way the customers see that company. In my opinion, is a very good factor to consider because certain brands are kind of loved by customers, right? Versus certain brands are not, I would not say hated, but they're not so much loved by the customers, right? So the difference is that the companies who kind of understand the customers better and cater the customer experience better based on the data points they consider and they make decisions, they allow those frontline workers to have access to those insights to be able to make those decisions. They truly make their customers love them, right? And I think there are certain KPIs, in my opinion, right? Like the customer satisfaction, customer experience in this kind of world where customer is the center of everything, right? The data is coming from customers, right? Customer is your kind of product. Imagine like, Meta, right? Who has so much information about customers, right? Their products are catered towards the customers. So,
Yes.
and I would don't know if, I can call them truly data driven, but, it's just my opinion that they leverage data really well, right? Because their products, they do come out very much focused on customer and they kind of leverage the data to enhance their products as well. Like look at like, Instagram, like, look at products like YouTube and, by, Google and other big companies. So they're giving access to customers so they can monetize, they can learn, and they're catering towards the customer experience. I think that is the most biggest, difference in my opinion, where you don't just think of becoming data driven, but you have to understand what is the outcome of being data driven means and work towards that.
That's very insightful, Chris, because what you just told is that your organization is data driven or not is basically represented by what customers think about you. If their satisfaction score is high, if their NPS is high, it means that you are moving towards being data driven.
Yeah, I mean, think of this as an example, right? Like Netflix, right? So what drives Netflix, right? Customers. So if you have the right content, which, is basically loved by the customers, then you gain subscribers, right? And that's what drives the stock price and everything. And so Netflix, in my opinion, like is a very good example of being data driven, right? And they create personalized experiences, the recommendation system and how they have always wanted to innovate, right? They created these hackathons where people will come and give the recommendations around how their algorithm can perform better. And that shows that an organization wants to cater to their customers, which will make them data driven by default.
And Krish, you have led data and AI programs across multiple sectors like communication, BFSI, education, and government. How do the challenges and success parameters differ across these industries?
So I have the kind of, the honor of working across these industries, right? And what I feel is like there's a big difference or big gap between one industry versus the other, right? Like consider like the banking system, right? They don't really take a lot of risks, right? Because of the ecosystem they're in, because their risk levels are very high because, if something happens, then of course, right? There's a lot of money at risk and the customers' information and everything, right? So a lot of the decisions they make are based around risk compliance and stuff. So they focus on a lot of those, right? Versus like retail, they can take some risks because I think they focus more on customer experience, how to optimize supply chain. So the gist here is that every industry has certain risks and compliance levels they have to abide to. And some industries, like, let's say media entertainment, right? They can adopt the latest technology, they can try out things because they want to make sure that they're ahead of their times, right? And their competition, etc. So I think what I've noticed is, a lot of these less risk averse versus high risk kind of industries, there's a big difference because I have seen a lot of like tabular reports and grid reports in some of these industries versus like flashy dashboards and AI ML usage in some of the other industries, right? And that's the difference where a lot of this risk and regulations they have to follow to enable a product to their consumers versus some of the other industries, they can just roll out something, test out with their customers, and if it doesn't work, then they can always roll it back, roll something new, right? Because the way they function is very different.
And that is why, you see very less innovation happening in the BFSI segment as such.
Yeah, I think, they have certain areas where they want to do more innovation, right? Around, let's say, fraud analytics, right? Insurance is more around claims and stuff. Now, a lot of people would think that these are table stakes, but there's constant evolution around how the fraud is being detected and helped with their customers are being helped, right? So I think there's definitely progress in that, but then there's a lot more room to improve and innovate for them versus like a lot of the other industries where they're kind of releasing products and they're scratching products. Like you've seen Meta, like so all these like layoff decisions and everything, they come because companies are innovating, they're creating these 15, 16 products across customer experience, and they quickly find out that out of these 15, like 5 are not working, they just shelf them, and then the other 10 which are working, they want to monetize that, right? So versus in BFS it's very different, right? So
Yes.
they have a lot of compliance regulations, and different countries have different regulations too. And a lot of these banks are not just within one country, they're global banks. So they have to understand how their data is being used and leveraged in other countries and how their products can be sold in different countries or different regions as well.
And we see, most of these organizations, they do collect data, but they struggle to extract the real business value out of it. And what are the frameworks or principles that you have found effective in turning raw data into measurable business outcomes?
So I feel like data collection, right, has to be done very strategically, right? So when an organization is collecting data, so they have to have a purpose for it. The outcome they're desiring from the data being collected and to be able to make a certain decision, right? That has to be their mind. So you have to always think backwards, like, from what business decisions are you trying to make? And based on that, like what data you need to collect and what are those key features within the data you're trying to extract, and then build certain models or reports where you can kind of democratize these insights to frontline workers to make decisions. So that is the most important thing. And a lot of times what happens is like you collect like anything and everything, And then you have this big problem around how they've come up with these data lakes and stuff, right? Now you use them effectively, then it works. If you don't know how to use them or leverage them, then it becomes a whole cost issue, right? Where you end up paying a lot, but then you face this problem of, why am I not getting the benefits of getting all this data into our ecosystem, right? So I think it's more around being very strategic around what data you're leveraging for what decisions for which business units, and then being very effective. And that also kind of goes through with cloud implementations around spinning infrastructure, bringing data, and then different tools. So all you're doing is like, you're increasing your technical debt, right? In the name of like, we want to be data driven, we want to make better business decisions, right? So data is a very strategic asset, so be very strategic around how you bring data in, how you kind of clean your data, transform your data, and use that data for your BI purposes or your AI and ML purposes to enhance your products and customer satisfaction, customer experience.
Yes. And you kind of mentioned it actually, because a lot of these organizations, they do collect data, but the data is so segregated across various departments and all those functions, that a single a singular view of the things is not available as such.
Yeah, everybody is like data rich, right? So they
Yes.
have a lot of data, right?
Yes.
But then they're not using the data, and a lot of times like, you're not getting the value of the data. So
Yes.
you're kind of insights poor, like data rich and insights poor, which kind of doesn't really help you with getting that impact you're kind of thinking of getting from data. So
Data
the
rich.
business impact gets impacted.
Yeah. Data rich, insights poor is the term.
Yeah, and truly, like, that used to be the term few years where BI was super popular, right? Now it's all about like, AI BI kind of concept, right? Where, those tabular grid reports are no longer kind of cool. Like, so you still need them for a lot of these regulatory reports and stuff for some of the analysts to understand some of these descriptive insights. But
Yes.
I would say like, a lot of business users today, they want self-service analytics where they can look at these insights but be able to make decisions, right? So move beyond those descriptive insights to more predictive, prescriptive kind of insights, right? And now with the whole AI ML into the mix, where all these large language models are coming in and they're being more accessible, and a lot of these BI platforms which were purely dependent on reports and dashboards, and now embedding those new AI based features to give a lot of these conversational insights or conversational analytics based insights to these business users directly. So business user can go in and ask a question around not just like, what is my revenue for this region, right? But things have evolved now beyond that, right? Now
Yes.
they can ask complex questions around, hey, like, what if I make this change in this region? How will that impact my revenue, right? So that is very powerful.
Yes, it. And once you talk about AI and automation, they are transforming industries rapidly. Yet we feel that human intuition remains irreplaceable. So how do you see this balance between human judgment and machine intelligence evolving in decision making?
Yeah, I think, I hate to use this kind of term, but, the garbage in, garbage out plays out really well here, right? So it's been like overused, but I'm always trying to find new ways to say this, right? But anyways, we'll stick to the basic, right? But see, AI is really good when you have good data, right? You have good data, governed data, and clean data. So a lot of times, like, I've seen organizations not prioritize this data governance aspect. And same thing, like they'll bring a lot of data. They would think like, let's feed it to the model. The AIM or data scientists will just use it, and then we'll get the insights, right? But what
Yes.
ends up happening is the data scientist who's supposed to build this, great model for business impact is cleaning the data, and working with the users and understanding the data and stuff. So the users understand the data, right? The data scientist understands what the users want from the data, and they would create this model and do iterations of extracting features and looking at the output, and then see how the trends are changing and stuff. But the data scientists, it takes them time to understand the whole nuances of data, right? What is the correct data? What is the unclean clean data? So a lot of times, like, these organizations will spend a lot of time, and data scientists will get frustrated around, and BI, AI teams will get frustrated because they are kind of the messengers. And then it becomes the truth around, don't kill the messenger concept, where, you are surfacing something, the business is like, this is not correct,
Yes.
because the business will catch it, right? Because you create insights in the form of PowerPoint or something, and you present to business, and business, the only thing they will catch is like where they can find something wrong, right? Because they're numbers people, right? So they know their kind of business, and that's the challenge, right? Where the big gap around people not understanding how important clean data is or governed data is. So I would say, like, focusing more on that to begin with, and enabling kind of these, making data democratized, where you bring in all these data silos fragmented, and have like a centralized kind of data ecosystem
Yes.
where you clean it, and then in the form of data products, or in, I don't want to stick to any terms, but then you ship them, democratize these kind of data products across business units, like marketing, finance and stuff, so that they can leverage that, and they can further create their own insights driven dashboards, or the data scientists can build models which are in the products and stuff.
Very well explained, Krish. Like this kind of, clarifies the entire process in which organizations should deal with data. Now, Krish, when we talk about scaling analytics or capabilities across enterprises, what are those key pillars, like, right from data structure, architecture to talent and governance that determine the long-term success?
So I would say, like, scaling is has been a big challenge for a lot of the organizations, because number one is you need to have the board and the executive team buy-in to begin with, right? And the board and the executive team understanding the impact of the whole AI, what, right? There has been a period where that was a big struggle. So you have seen a lot of these roles emerge, like CDO, CDAO, and stuff, right? And organizations have used those executives to be the enabler of these initiatives, right? And explain to the board and the executive team why these initiatives around data AI are important. Right? In my opinion, scaling has been a challenge because, me, especially coming from a services organization, right, working with large enterprises, small, medium enterprises, right, I think the challenge has been around resources as well, right? So the skill pool, I think, has been, one of the challenge where, people are not kind of realizing the fact that a lot of their teams need to be, upskilled to manage and maintain and kind of see that vision as well, right? Because a lot of times, like, as a services company and as an executive, you can be super innovative around how you want to do things and turn things around in your organization. But if the culture within your teams and the technology you're leveraging is not kind of enabling you, then you fail,
Yes.
right? So in my opinion, the skill factor, the skill pool is also very important, because let's say I have a team of 5 and they're not super motivated, they don't want to learn, right? Then how can I be successful as a data driven leader, right? So the technology as well, right? If, let's say, again, I don't want to name any technologies here, but you are in legacy platforms and legacy technology, right? The modern, data stack, you need to understand how and why it's important, right? Because you know the the data is being used by business directly. They can clean the data, they can query the data. So the modern data stack will enable you to become more innovative and put the decisions, or the power of making decisions, in the hands of business or the frontline workers, right? Versus, like, the legacy was more technology driven, right? You were dependent on IT teams, and if IT teams are so backed up, then they don't have people, and then you augment them with some folks. So the talent and the technology, the culture are super important for you to scale. Also, the innovation these days has been so quick. Like it's so tough to keep up with which model is on the top. You have seen the latest release of Google, Gemini. Like you will see the stock market is all over Google now, right? And Nvidia was one of the top AI stock, but now it's Google because of their TPUs and the Gemini model and stuff, right? Now there is previously, a few months back, DeepSeek was fully kind of in the news, and then there's Kimi. So what's happening with these models, and then there's Claude, like Opus, which just released. So now the innovation is so quick these days that it's so tough to catch up with which model is on the top. But I think for me, what's more important is all these models are great, right? But
Yes.
what is your kind of problem statement, right? And which model do you need to leverage for which task? And that's where the whole automation previously was more workflow oriented, rule based and stuff. But now this whole agentic system, I think, in the next 1-2 years, people will create these agentic mesh kind of architecture where there's agents which
Yes.
are kind of doing a lot of these automations, I would say innovative automations, right? With human in the loop, of course, right? Because you need to make sure that you cannot fully give the autonomous access to these agents, but have this kind of workflows where there's human in the loop and the AI is kind of helping with a lot of these mundane tasks, which can be automated versus human is at the center of this whole ecosystem.
This took me, kind of a few moments to kind of reflect on things. And Krish, so you have been a PNL and vertical head for multiple organizations, and you have been responsible for both growth and innovation.
Mhm.
So what are the few leadership philosophies or decision principles that have helped you balance creativity with commercial accountability?
So I feel like at least the way I operate is while you're in a role, right? The customer is who you're working for, right? So I could be a practice leader, I could be a commercial leader, right? In the end, we're both solving customer problems. Now, there's some boundaries around what a practice leader does versus what a commercial leader can do, right? So as a practice leader, when I was doing that kind of, I was in that journey, my goal was to speak to commercial leaders, interrogate, talk to customers, and see what are the problems and build some of these accelerators or frameworks to solve their problems.
Yes.
Now, as a commercial leader, what happens is like now you switch your hat from becoming that solution oriented practice leader to more kind of working with the customers, doing more research around where the industry is headed, right? And being that advisor to the C level in those respective industries, and then helping them kind of understand the gap, the maturity levels of their organization versus their industry, and how can we fill those gaps? And what are those kind of the business problems which they should tackle, low hanging fruit versus like long term strategic goals they should have, and then how can technology play a part of it and then bring our kind of practice leaders team offerings more catered towards that journey, right? So I think for me, I would be very honest to kind of, mention this, right? But that the transition was not easy, because when you are a practice leader, you're solutioning, right? So when I transitioned into sales role, I was still feeling like the first 6 months or so, I was still solutioning with the customers while I was selling, but I was able to solution. But then I kind of slowly transitioned into, you know, being the smartest guy in the room versus bringing the smartest people into the room to help a customer problem getting solved, right? So I feel like for sales leaders, like you should have a technology angle, but your priority should be understanding your customers' challenges, keeping a know-how of the industry they're in and their competition, and how we can address those gaps for them to become more data-driven, technology-driven company.
This is also very insightful. Like, you told one line that, you have to move away from being the smartest person in the room to bringing in the smartest people in the room who can solve those problems. And you have to move from the solutioning mindset to understanding the problem of the customer mindset.
Yeah, I think being that, so moving from a technology leader to an industry leader, right? That gap you have to fill by yourself, right? Nobody's going to teach you industry. So that comes from a lot of research which you have to do. So I used to have a research team
Yes.
which is doing constant research on the industry around technology trends, around industry trends. Let's say, for example, when I was heading the cable communications group, we were looking at our whole portfolio around different customers for the top cable and communications customers in the North America region, and then looking at where's the cable and communications industry heading to, right? Cable, a lot of people feel like, oh, you still have cable, right? Now it's the internet world, right? A lot of these services are digitized, right? So helping those customers understand the transition around, from cable to these digital services, and a lot around network support and stuff. Sorry. So being that industry leader is very important.
You want to have some water? Yes, you have it.
Yeah, I don't have water.
Yeah, you have it. Yeah. Now we can
Sorry,
take
I
a break.
wasn't feeling well, so
So you have some water, Chris.
it's okay.
Sure.
Just a few breaths, and I think I should be good.
Yeah. Great. Now, Krish, one of the toughest questions for data leaders remains how do you measure the ROI on analytics and AI? So, what are the
Yeah, I
frame?
think that is a very difficult question, honestly, right? So in my opinion, previously, right, when we were in the data and BI world, right, the ROI was easy to measure because when it comes to data, how much data did I move from my source to target?
Yes.
Volume, right? Volume of data. It's very important, right? So the KPI. And then the quality of data, clean, ETL process. So these are like measurable because you can say, oh, data is 100% clean versus 80% clean. And you have moved like, one, terabyte of data, 5 terabytes. It's easy. In BI world, yes, you had 5 dashboards with 10 KPIs. Yes, you have delivered those. When it comes to AI, it's really tough, right? Because you don't know like what's happening in these like, models, right? What they're thinking. Sometimes like they're black box, right? So you input the data, and let's say you are a data scientist. I'm a data scientist, right? The way you look at certain data points versus I look at certain data points are different, right? So now the model efficacy, when you kind of work on it, right, it could be around like 10-15% versus when I do it, it could be around 8%. So in AI projects, I feel like, you have to think differently when it comes to the ROI, right? Being kind of the baseline, right, will help you kind of drive to that ROI factor, right? Because as I said, in data, like you had this source, and in target, you have to get the data, lift and shift, and then clean and stuff, right? The baseline and the ROI is very easy to measure. In AI, it's like you have a business problem and then you have data. So there's no baseline here, right? So there's a lot of data now, plethora of data, and then there's one business problem, right? Now, what, in my opinion, organizations can do and services or companies can do is like, break down this business problem into, you know, 5 things or, 3 things, right? And what is that impact? Is it revenue, top line, bottom line, customer satisfaction? Now, when it comes to customer satisfaction, it's really tough, right? Now you break down further, PS scores and stuff. Now, that way, you can take this data, you can address a problem saying NPS score is here. Now, can we leverage data and then see how this can be improved by 5.5 or 1 or 2, right? And what are the challenges, right? What are the problems, and how can we address those customer situations and improve those elements, right?
Yes.
If you're in call center, then are your agents not taking enough calls? How is the call quality? Are they not solving problems, right? Do they have the right information about customer? Let's say you're calling in, I'm calling in, and they don't address you by name. I'm gonna be mad, right? Like, I already mentioned my name. Like, you should be addressing by name. You don't ask me for my information again. A lot of those things. How can the agents be given the customer information when they call with certain data points saying, like, if I call them directly saying, hi, Krish, how are you today? Right? Versus like when they call, you're already using the IVR and entering your information and phone number, everything. And then when they call saying, hi, welcome to XYZ, like, what is your name? What is your phone number? Oh, we have to do this authentication. So a lot of those things, right? Now you can measure in certain way, right? How were things previously versus how are things now? Right? There was one organization where they had a chatbot, a business to business kind of, for cable communications company. They had this chatbot and it was very much like rule based, right? So now with whole Gen AI, what you could do is turn that rule based chatbot into more kind of, with sentiment analysis into it, with more information around customer and more prescriptive analytics for the agent so that you are not just converting each and every conversation into a phone call, but you're able to resolve those queries in the chatbot itself. So that way, the calls coming into your call center are less, and then that increases, helps with customer satisfaction. Also, it doesn't cost you money because every call costs money, right? So I think that way you have to be a little more smart about how you define the baseline and how you break the business problem into these KPIs and have measurable outcomes there with baseline and how things have improved. And that is how I feel like, we should think about ROI.
Yes. Yes. Break down the business problems, define the right KPIs, and then see what is its impact on that KPI.
Have a baseline of the KPI and then look at the improvement areas for the KPI and use the data points to make sure that those are embedded in your kind of decisions.
Now, since we are talking about data, so, data privacy will obviously come into the picture. So, we see a lot of data privacy regulations tightening globally. And also in India, you have DPDPA Act coming up. So how should enterprises design responsible data strategies that balance innovation, compliance, and trust?
I feel like this is like very much a hype topic. At the same time, it dies down quickly in organization because a lot of organizations don't know how to solve this, right? Because the skill set around this whole ethical, responsible AI, right, is pretty limited in the market, in my opinion, right? So
Yes.
when I was in working in a large GSI, we had responsible AI practice, right? And
Yes.
I know for a fact, like a lot of these, big four and other consulting organizations, they have practices around responsible AI, ethical AI. But I'm sure like the revenue they bring in is very less, right? Because a lot of it is only advisory, right? So I am kind of yet to see a lot of organizations where they're effectively implemented a lot of these policies and they've solved for it because it's really difficult because even these policies are changing, right? So sometimes yes, certain policies you can abide to, but some policies are changing with the the changes in AI, how AI is innovating, right? So, imagine like it's in India, it's perfect example, like a city is expanding, right? So you set guardrails for certain city to a certain limit and it's expanding. Then you bring in new kind of,
Yes.
ring road and facilities and stuff. And now the policies, regulations change. Some of those villages, they come under the city. So it's an evolving topic, in my opinion. But organizations have to really consider this very as a very important kind of topic because as you implement these AI models, right, the many kind of components which go into the model we don't know. So a lot of bias and a lot of ethical reasons. Like you have to have these policies for responsible AI because of GDPR. Like Europe, you'll see like a lot of these regions, right? The adoption is kind of different across different regions, different countries, different states, right? Like, California has certain regulations versus certain states they don't, right? So I feel like organizations have to really invest time into understanding these responsible AI regulations and everything and then implement them when they're implementing these products because ultimately all these products are geared towards customer and the better the products, the better the customer satisfaction and that will increase your top line, bottom line, everything. If you worry about some of these responsible AI and ethics, then you end up getting in trouble. That's why you see a lot of these companies getting sued
Yes.
because they have leveraged certain data, they're biased in data, and they have not taken probably permissions in using certain data to train certain models. So organizations are becoming more aware of this right now, in my opinion.
And we see a lot of it happening in India as well. So, I'm kind of,
Yes, I think, India is very different, right? And a lot of it, in my opinion, depends on the government,
yes,
as in who's running the government, right?
yes,
So, for example, now in the US, the government might be more lean towards enabling AI and helping push AI versus probably the previous government was more conservative around AI, right? In
yes,
India as well, as they see more benefits and less risks emerging from AI products and implementations, they need that comfort level to kind of push for AI.
right. So a lot of it has also to do with the policies and local governance which is there.
Yeah, I think you can consider an organization, a country kind of the same way, right? The board, the leadership.
Yes,
I was, for example, like, we do work within private sector and public sector, right? I was actually speaking with somebody from a certain state, state local, procurement, and I spoke about AI and, how organizations are leveraging AI and how certain state local agencies are looking at AI, right? And I went on speaking for 10 minutes around that, and then I get a, one sentence, two sentence answer around our leadership is not really looking at AI right now. So I think, that's where I feel like maybe as a services organization, we want to do a lot of AI and help organizations, you know, their readiness for AI, right? We're not considering that, right? And that's where it's kind of, even as a sales leader who has, sold many, innovative projects to large C level at bigger organizations, sometimes you get that light bulb moment, right? Saying, probably I should have listened to them first,
yes,
right? So there's learning everywhere. So you have to keep learning, in this current world, I feel like, you have to keep learning. It doesn't matter from a C-level executive you're speaking with or, a frontline worker who's, actually, in a store selling a product, right? So you have to be ready to learn from anybody and everybody, and you have to learn to listen as well. As I said, like, stop being that smartest person in the room to bringing the smart people into the room, or kind of listen and then reacting and not trying to sell anything and everything to people, right? But sell what's more relevant to them.
yes. And that's why, it's always told that sales is a very noble profession.
Yeah, I mean, it's a profession where there's
Mm.
what can I say? Like, there a lot of hatred. So I've been in certain situations where when I was a practice leader, right? People were like, "Oh no, that's a salesperson from that company. Oh, I need to run away. They're gonna try to sell me something," right? So now I think that is the perception people have about salespeople, right? That they're constantly trying to sell and push. But now the notion of sales is also kind of changing, right? So you have to be that trusted advisor. I hate to use that term, but you have to be a person who's trying to help your customer and elevate them in their organizations, and also help the organization fill that gap compared to where the industry is heading to versus where the organization is.
Yes. And I think, since you have seen both the sides of the spectrum, I think, some of the best sales guys that I have met are people like you, like, who have kind of done
Thank
tech,
you.
saw it, and now they are kind of trying to help, kind of understand customer problems. Sometimes I also feel is that, kind of a lot of more tech guys, should kind of get into sales part of the things as well. But unfortunately, a lot of them have a very negative perception about sales.
Yes, and this goes to, my very initial beginning point around personality, right? So a lot of technology people, in my opinion, right, they don't like sales because they want to be embedded in technology. They feel like if they go into sales, then they'll lose their touch of technology. And a lot of people, the personality can be very much like an introvert personality as well, right? But sales, you need to be like out there, like, you can be an introvert, extrovert, whatever, but you need to be out there, right? So
Yes.
Imagine, like, so whatever the situation is, like, let's say that, I just lost a sale, right? But it
Yes.
doesn't matter. If I have a next call with the customer, I need to be there. I need to be there for that customer. And I need to have that mindset that I need to help them, not the mindset that, oh, I need to win this sale. How can I help them? Right. So
Mm.
in my opinion, like, I've always like tried to help customers. So it was never an agenda to push a certain product. Um, and try to push them a lot on certain product, right? Not
Yes.
like a typical like account executive kind of thing, right? As a sales leader, like, you have to be really patient. You have to understand, and this is where like read the room comes in, right? You have to really be patient about the situation, understand, because a lot of customers are going through a lot of like mergers and acquisitions and these days, right? So, there could be something you're doing with certain customer where you thought that this is going to work out in January. And okay, let's build that pipeline. Let's engage with them. But suddenly something happens like a merger, and then all the tech initiatives are stalled, right?
Yes.
So how do you adapt, right? So understand the new customer. What is their tech stack? What are the gaps? So you have to constantly like, you know, be on your toes and think on your feet and try to be very innovative and very in an advisory mode to the customer where they should feel like they're learning something from you. At the same time, you're learning about their organization, what they want to do.
Yes. Now, Krish, when you look ahead, what excites you the most, about where analytics, BI, AI are basically heading to, and what keeps you cautious as well?
So I feel like what's ahead is very super exciting, in my opinion. So I think it's going to be great next few years where
Mhm.
innovation is going to be at a much faster pace. I don't think innovation is going to stop because there's a huge, fierce competition between these large, giant companies, right? Technology companies, and
Yes.
they want to win the race, right? And now it's a good thing for us because that innovation is going to help a lot of the organizations solve a lot of the problems they've been facing for probably decades, if not like in the last 5 years or so. Now, I think there's multiple angles to from which you can approach this, right? Is from your personal front, right? How things are going to change for you, right? From an organization's front, like from your job and roles perspective, right? So
Yes.
AI is going to just help you become much better and much smarter. In my opinion, you have to think of AI that way, right? Don't be scared of AI. Don't be worried because this is something maybe I should not say it, but I'll say it because if you are worried about AI and scared about AI, then probably you might become redundant soon, right? So the goal is how can you embrace AI is going to be super important for you. So for example, this weekend, um, don't want to use the term vibe coding, but I'll have to use it. I was working with my daughter and I told her that she's first grade, but I said, we'll learn AI, right? And I'll build something for you where rather than just watching some, YouTube videos, now you can learn on your iPad, right? So I sat down, thanks to Gemini, I'm not endorsing them, but with their latest model where you can use the AI studio and you can vibe code some of the stuff. And she goes to some classes, like they call it Kumon here, not endorsing them as well. But, so I've kind of sat down and I built an app for her where it's a gamification based app where she can do math, right? First grade math, very simple, like 17 minus 7,
Yes.
15 plus 3, right? And she was so excited. And it took me literally like less than 15 minutes to do it, right? Took me longer for me to get it working on iPad, but to
Yes.
build something like that, right? And on my personal front, right? And also maybe teach my daughter who's in first grade where she can talk to AI and build something, and the AI is going to give you this application. And if she doesn't like it, she can talk back to AI and say, I need this, I need that, right? So as a first grader, imagine like you're able to talk to AI and build an application which you can use at your grade. And then now she goes to second grade, she can do something. Or she wants to do second grade math, right? Now she can do it. She can ask AI, teach me how to do it. How can I learn? So the possibilities of the Gen Z or Gen X, whatever generation we're in, right? So of them getting exposed to AI at that age, and imagine like where AI would be, or I don't know how the world's gonna be the next 5 to 10 years when they come to like high school, right? So that's personal front, right? Now imagine like as an organization, right? You have this plethora of data, and now you have this large language models, and the compute cost, everything is coming down. But I hope the language model, the using of these language models cost also comes down, right?
Yes.
You can just, give the data and train the language model on your data, fine tune it, and then give access to your frontline workers. Imagine I'm a pharma company giving the data access to the pharma salesperson who's like, traveling on the go on their phone, and they're talking to a physician, then they're able to kind of get those insights on their phone, and they know what to say, right? Based on the prescriptive insights. And then they're able to close that deal. It's going to be like super, super important for organizations to think innovatively around use cases which are for AI. Not everything is for AI, right? They have to understand this. And you don't have to use like a large language model for a small problem, or for just to give access to your employees to say hello and have, small chat, right? So I think be very smart around how you embrace AI, how you leverage AI.
Yes.
And I think the possibilities are endless, in my opinion. So the whole agentic AI, if I'm not talking about it, I guess people are not going to watch this podcast, right? So I'll, I'll I'll talk about it just for that sake. But in my opinion, like the whole multi-agent systems are so-called the agentic mesh, like data mesh, like, data products, like, all these agents, all the analogies like from data will carry over to AI in the form of agents now, I believe, right? So this whole agentic mesh where, you know, you have agents for different purpose, right? And they will only react when they need to.
Yes.
It's not like it's a workflow where you have to say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and then it stops there. The whole workflow stops, right? These agents are smart, right? So the agentic mesh will really help organizations. Hopefully, they embrace it to solve, bigger problems which they might have today, and help them become more kind of, AI driven, technology driven companies.
This is very insightful, Krish. See, like we had kind of booked, 45 minutes. I think we have, I've had, it's a pleasure, kind of listening to you, and the
Thank you.
way you explained the things, Krish. I think there were very few people who have come on this session who have explained AI and data driven stuff in such well concise, example led kind of way that you did. Thank you so much, Krish, for joining us on this podcast at Dawdle.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
We're
So I think
extremely
you can tell that I'm very passionate about this, right? And I
yes.
think it goes back to what I said again, like it's the personality, right? So to be in certain industry and to be more kind of always that analysis driven or curious, right? Is
Yes.
going to be very important. And, I'm always like coached people on, having the right attitude always. Like, whenever I hire people, like I think attitude and the curiosity, some of these skills are very important, right? Because that's what will make them successful.
Absolutely, Krish. And I will be in touch with you thoroughly, and we look forward to hosting you again, Krish.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Yeah. Bye.